Today's guest is Chuck Riddle. He's a senior advisor at the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission. And Chuck and I have we've known each other for many years, since 2008. We're getting old. We've been in this business a long time, but thanks for joining me today, Chuck.
Glad to be here. Thanks for having me, Chairman.
So for those who haven't gotten to know you as I have over the years, talk a bit about where you're from, who you are, and what you do.
Sure. So I am from Alexandria, Virginia. I'm one of the few natives to the DMV, born and raised in the Northern Virginia area. And my role right now is a senior advisor / program manager for the SEC. I've been started off in the private sector. I'll do a little bit of biographical here, and you can course correct me as we go. So my first job out of college, I thought I wanted to work on Capitol Hill. So when I graduated, I got a job with the U.S. congressman as a legislative correspondent, and I thought it would be a great job. I was making all of $19,000 a year, and the representative that I went to work for, I started working with him in August, and he lost his primary like within a month of me starting working for him. So within about 5 months, I was looking for another job. And he was the fourth ranking member of Congress at the time. So it was a bit of a surprise that he lost his reelection. So anyway, did not follow that career path. Ended up answering a Washington Post ad, and I started working for a tech startup. And my first several positions were actually with a tech startup in Northern Virginia. Was connected with basically a serial entrepreneur who started some companies, and bounced around with him a couple of times. I went to work for one company called NetTel, and I was the second employee at that company, and we grew it to about 650 people.
Wow.
We were nationwide. I had stock options and thought I was going to make a lot of money. We were 6 weeks away from going public on the NASDAQ. We actually had our ticker symbol and everything. And I was counting my money. I was 27 years old, about to make a windfall of many millions of dollars. But unfortunately, the tech bubble burst. And instead of becoming a millionaire, the company went bankrupt.
Oh.
So I was left to kind of pick up the pieces and figure out what to do next. So I thought, well, I've got tech experience. I'm going to go work for a well-established telecommunications company that was more than 100 years old, Cable and Wireless. So I went to work for them. And about a year into it, they ended up going bankrupt.
Oh, no.
so much for the safe harbor of a well-established company. So after that, I ended up actually consulting with Booz Allen. And that was my first really interaction with the federal government, was as a consultant at Booz Allen. And when I was with Booz, they offered a program where you could get your master's degree with Johns Hopkins while you're working there in Tyson's Corner with Booz Allen. So I started doing that. I also got my first project management certification. And that sort of introduced me to the federal government. I was supporting a customer there who ended up becoming the CIO at an agency at USDA. And I went to work for him and stood up a project management office at Food Safety Inspection Service at the USDA. So that was my transition / introduction to government. And from there, kind of worked my way up. Ended up with USDA for 6 or 7 years, and worked my way up to CTO there, and really wanted to attain the position of CIO. So I remember I was on vacation visiting my sister down in Florida, and I answered 4 different USA Jobs postings for a CIO. I applied for 4. 3 of them I never heard back from. The 4th one, I was their top candidate and ended up becoming the CIO at the government printing office for the next 6 years after that. So was with GPO, really enjoyed it. And then an opportunity opened up at the SEC. And I went, kind of stepped out of the CIO role, became the Chief Technology Officer at SEC. And a couple of years into that, my boss quit, and I became the acting CIO for a year and a half. So I've kind of, I've been there, done that in terms of the senior executive level positions. And an interesting twist for me, when COVID hit, I decided that my wife had always wanted to relocate outside the DC area. So when COVID hit and everybody in the federal government was teleworking, I decided to take a radical left turn and step out of senior executive service and become a non-supervisor, and so that I could relocate to live in Tennessee. So I've been in Tennessee now for about a year and a half. And that's kind of the short version of how I ended up where I'm at today.
Wow, very interesting. I mean, initially, I'd be very concerned for anybody who worked at a company you worked at that they wouldn't have a job.
Yeah, I felt like was it me or was it them? You know, I felt like there was a dark cloud following me, but thankfully that stopped a couple cycles into it. I figured out it must not have been me.
No, I mean, when you struggle with something, because that happens, right? The companies go under, or projects go away, or a company doesn't get the recompete contract, and then they staff are let go. What's that bounce like? I mean, you've been through it a few times. What's that? I mean, you did it. So how's that work?
Yeah, it was tough. I basically, kind of had to redefine myself a few times along the way. I never went into working in a career with the goal of becoming, or an IT executive. My degree, I have an MBA that I got from Johns Hopkins mid-career, but my bachelor's degree is actually in communications. So I thought for sure I was going to be a PR person or something like that. So I was talking to my son the other day, he's 21, and he was kind of asking me the same thing. And I'm like, listen, you really have to be open and flexible to kind of redefining yourself as you progress through your career, because you really don't know how it's going to turn out. So, that's kind of how I took it. I was flexible and just tried to take opportunities as they popped up. And sometimes they panned out, sometimes they didn't. But I really felt like going from private sector to government was a good move for me, because obviously the stability of government was attractive. And I found that, coming from private sector, it was with some of the, more aggressive mindsets about how to get things done, I flourished in the government. And that was kind of, I guess, the secret to my success is really, coming in and really working super hard and kind of having the attitude of a private sector person in the federal government. And that's pretty much served me well. But I certainly didn't set out with this course in mind when I started.
So throughout that journey, you've been in employment and in IT and working for some time. What's something you've stumbled across that if we came to you, Chuck, and said, Chuck, today you get to make this decision and we want to change something for the better, what's something you've witnessed that we should probably consider changing?
Are you talking about the federal government in particular, or
IT? Just anything you've seen along the way, like in terms of how we do work or how we manage people or anything really?
Yeah, well, I guess I'll answer that from the federal government perspective first, and you can narrow it down from there. For federal government, especially in IT, I would love to see the federal government allow IT to have multi-year budgets and not have a single year budget, because I find that that's very difficult to accomplish things in IT with only 1 year funding, right? And because it's, at least from my experience in the IT world in the government, you have to fight for those dollars because you're competing with mission goals. And even though IT plays a critical role in those mission goals, it's always a firefight to make sure you get your funding for things every year. So from the federal side, I would love to see that change and allow for more multi-year funding. And I guess in terms of more general, the whole relationship between IT and the business, it's kind of there's a divide there. And I feel like that divide is shrinking as technology becomes more mainstream. I mean, consumers, non-IT people in the government or in industry, they have a lot of tech at their disposal at home. So they're a lot more educated than they used to be when I started this IT career. So they come with their own expectations and demands, if you will, about what they expect IT to do. And I think that IT needs to be more flexible in working with the business and vice versa. That there needs to be less of a gap between the business side and the IT side. I wish I could change that. I think I've had small wins along the way, but it's certainly not something I've been able to solve completely.
That's an interesting one, right? I mean, you and I are both in the same boat, right? Federal IT, and that's definitely a challenge. And I think even for business programs, right? If you have a mission essential system that the business has to fight for the dollars, it's the same problem for them, and that they're trying to build out this capability, but they're doing it on 1 year money.
Yeah,
it's a bit of a tough challenge, you're right?
It is a tough thing, absolutely.
So what's next? I mean, you're not retiring by any means, and you've been there, done that on some things. What do you see for yourself here in the near to late future?
It's a great question. I wish I had a great answer. I don't, to be honest, answers I don't know. I'm happy in the role that I'm in. I manage a a really large contract for the SEC, and I enjoy that. I also enjoy the fact that I'm not a supervisor anymore. So I don't have some of those pressures on me, but I don't think this is the role where I'll end up permanently long term. You know, I'm hoping that the government becomes more flexible with allowing IT executives to live outside the DC area. I personally think that would be a huge benefit to the federal government to have people that are in IT, but they're not at headquarters in Washington from a continuity perspective. I would love to stay in the federal government longer in an executive role, but not in DC. So we'll see. I'm quite sure that my executive days are not over yet, but at least for the immediate future, I'm pretty content in the role that I'm in. And we'll see what happens after that. I honestly, I have no idea. The move has been good for my family, and I'm happy with that so far.
Well, Chuck, I appreciate you coming on. I too am looking forward to what's next for you. I mean, we've known each other a long time, and for those who know us, know I followed you to some of those places. So I look forward to continuing to work with you, and can't wait to see what's next for you.
Thanks, Jeremy. It's been good talking to you.